Today we're going to take a look at how to pull up your baseline data so that you can begin disaggregating that data and having in-depth discussion with your PLC on what the next step should be as the group, as well as you as an individual teacher and with your students. So right now I have opened up Firefox and I am at the DCPS website, and to show you how to locate the Limelight, if you're not familiar, you're going to scroll down, pick Our Schools, Instructional Research and Accountability, and then you're going to see a link to Insight and Inform, and you're going to click to log in. There you'll be prompted to log in with your DCPS login, and you will get to this screen and how you will find your assignment and then locate the title of the LSA, the Learning Schedule Assessment. And I'm going to choose LSA Algebra 1 Module A Baseline for our example today, since most of the students have taken this test. So we click there, and you're going to come to this screen here, and your assignment reports are really where you're going to look at. This is where you're going to drill down into your data to see what actual standards have the students have a good grasp of or may not have a good grasp of. And in this instance with the baseline, you should see some deficiencies. Alright, this is the item assessment. It gives you just a overall by question what the percent correct was for the entire group here. But we're going to go down, in case you don't know, you do have a student proficiency report across all the teachers, and the standards assessment report here across all of the teachers. We're going to drill down a little bit and go to the tree, and there we're going to drill down by section so that we can look by period, and you can actually get down by student if you click this tab here. But if you notice across the top, the percent correct per standard for the district, for Oceanway School, and then by teacher and section number. And if you haven't already realized, your last digit of your section number is your period. So if we're looking at Jeff Davis here, period 4 Algebra Honors class, we notice that his percentage correct on this standard is 76%, for this standard 38%, and on this standard 68%. So now you have some discussion with your PLC when you're looking across the grade level. We notice that in this standard we have some big deficiencies here. So what the discussion is, where do we begin to pace our lessons, and what do we do for our students in order to improve the proficiency in this standard? You also know that looking at this standard that many of the students are already successful. So you're not going to have to spend as much time on this particular standard. So this is the kind of discussions that you want to have in regards to your baseline data and how you're going to tentatively pace out your lessons and create your knowledge slips for each of your learning targets for each unit. Again, this is just one baseline for Module A in Algebra, and for those who have their unit baselines, you will do this process, and you can use these reports and look at different things to help you out, and just clicking some examples to show you how you can even drill down to the actual student here and see, you know, by standard. Obviously this was a 2-question standard. Either they got it 100%, 50%, or 0%. And so this will help you in understanding where your student lies in the proficiency for each of those standards. So take a look at these reports, be able to drill down, you know, and that's where you're going to begin to have that conversation with your PLC and reflect with yourself on what you need to do as a next step. You can import that or export that into Excel, and if you like to play with Excel and the features that are in there, you can export this data there and have some fun with it. But this is the beginning of your conversation with your PLC as far as where do we go after we've given the baseline. There are individual student reports that you can print out for each student, and it will give them a detailed report on where they're at currently. This will be great too for your summative assessments for each unit, to actually let the students see these reports and keep that. Alright, so I hope you've learned a little bit about how to access the reports in Limelight so that you can begin having discussions, at least with your baseline assessments, in how to pace out your lessons. An additional piece to the process is having students self-assess when they're taking the baseline and the post-test. And there are several ways to capture this self-assessment, either directly on the test if you have the luxury of having the students write on the test. In cases of the LSAs, which are very lengthy, we don't have the luxury of actually writing on them. But there are documents that have been created, and of course you can always use your creativity to design some sort of student self-assessment tool. But I want to show you this one as far as using it in regards to the baseline and the post-test, and having students actually assess their thinking, their metacognition going through each of the problems, and then using this as a learning tool after the fact. After they've taken the baseline, they can go back and use this and reflect and revise their thinking. So you notice the piece here as far as the question is here, and they can bubble their answers down here, work out their problems. There's a space for revision and a space for reflection, and circling whether they are confident or unsure gives you an insight to their thinking and what they believe to be true in answering that problem. So this is one tool that you can use as a student self-assessment piece as they're going through their baseline and their post-test. I've heard several different creative ways of capturing this data from the teachers here at Oceanway. So again, this is not to say this is how you should do it, but this is a tool that you could use in capturing that self-reflection, that self-assessment for students in regards to taking their test and looking at their thinking. So that's the purpose of this document here. And it should be used as a learning tool throughout the unit as they revise their baseline assessments and their thinking in regards to their standards. And the other tool here is, once you finish a module or a unit, you want to have the students track their progress. And this document here is a good way of doing that. This is actually tailored towards language arts, where you see that some of the learning targets are main idea, tone, words, and phrases. And so this is how the student will track their baseline and their post-test so that they can see their progress. And then what I really liked here is the reflection piece on both of those assessments. I've got that many out of this many questions correct and scored this percentage. My strongest learning target was blank. My weakest was blank. So the students are really taking ownership of their learning. They know where they're starting. They know where they're ending. And this is a great way to capture that and use that in put that in their portfolio so that they understand they have taken ownership of their learning. So here's another tool. Again, this is not to say that you have to use this piece. There are several creative ways of capturing this, and I look forward to seeing how many of the teachers will be creative in tracking progress for each student and having students track their own progress. So prior to our faculty meeting, which is coming up on September 6th, I would like for you to meet with your PLC to discuss a few things. In the video, we began talking about baseline data and how to analyze that, looking in the insight to figure out how to pull that data and then make instructional decisions. So meet with your PLC to discuss the pacing of the unit after analyzing the data so that you can move forward in making adjustments based on what the data showed you. The second thing you want to talk about is the ways in which you will capture student self-assessment. There needs to be some form, some tool, some way of capturing what they're thinking so that the students take ownership of their thinking throughout the process. Give them time to reflect, give them time to revise. Use this tool as a part of the learning process within the unit. And then the third thing is, how will the students take ownership of tracking their progress? I've given you a tool, but again, you can be creative in deciding how your students will actually take ownership in this process so that they can see where they were at the baseline and where they ended up at on the summative. So these are 3 expectations I'd like for you to discuss with your PLC. As we approach the conclusion of this Flip Faculty Meeting video, I do want to go over a few organizational items before we close. Teachers, the lunches are actually smoothing themselves out pretty good, and the main thing we want to remember is that we do not have any time to stand around in the cafeteria. When you pick up your students, it's time to get them up and get them out very quickly as the next group is coming in. If we can work that transition out between picking up and dropping off, the lunches will run very, very smoothly. Students are getting their food on time, they're able to eat, but the main hiccup is the transition where teachers are kind of standing around when they get their classes up and lined up and then exiting, and that wasted minute or 2 is actually going to cause a delay for the next group. So please make sure that you are exiting very quickly. If you are not down on time, we will be lining your classes up outside in the hallway so that the classes that are coming in will not be delayed. One other thing is we want to make sure that every student that is a Buck Pass holder gets to utilize their privilege. Please do not tell students they are not allowed to leave your class a minute early or they have to have their agenda if they have a Buck Pass. These are some of the privileges that we want to uphold with our students so that receiving a Buck Pass is really a privilege and it's something that they strive to get. So under no circumstances are you to impede a student from receiving the privileges that come with possessing a Buck Pass, and I appreciate your cooperation on that. And then we're going to shoot for beginning our morning announcements on the TV at 9:40 a.m. We're going to be releasing the students directly at 9:30 so that by the time the hallway's clear and it's 9:40, you'll hear the bell, and that's when we'll begin morning announcements. And then at 9:45, when the school bell rings for first period, I will come on very briefly to address the students. And so we appreciate your cooperation. Make sure you have your TVs on and allow students to come in, be seated, so the announcements will begin at 9:40. And that will minimize the time that you need to be in the hallways from 9:30 to 9:45. A couple of general reminders. Action teams will be meeting on September 6th. Actually, that's on September 6th at 8:45. District time writing scores for the first district time writing are to be entered into Insight by 9/7. The reading benchmark is going to be administered on 9/12, the math on 9/13, and science on 9/17. We will be on a school-wide testing schedule for those 3 days. The FAIR assessment and SRI windows are open. Social studies teachers will be administering the FAIR test this year, and SRI will be administered in Read 180 classes. Department meetings will be held on September 19th. That is an early release day.